Are you a pick-me girl? Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I want to talk about the concept of pick-me girls and neediness versus desire. So I see the word pick-me and calling girls pick-me's just thrown around on social media just so recklessly lately, and it's kind of like with anything. There was an original meaning to that term, and then it just kind of snowballed into this idea that anytime a woman was doing something that another woman didn't like, the woman would call the girl who she didn't like a pick-me. And it was just this insult you would throw around, and it really has kind of lost a lot of its meaning. So when I looked it up to actually find out what the origin of the term pick-me was, is essentially it's one of those girls. I would say the explanation is more like the cool girl, like that girl who's sort of trying to be like, I'm not like other girls, I'm different than other girls, and it's kind of almost like rejecting anything about her that might be a feminine, or even just in our society a female trait. She's the type of girl who's like, oh, I just can't have female friends because I just don't get along with women, and has to like constantly get attention from men because she's trying to prove that she's like different. And I think that can be taken in a lot of different ways. I've seen it in girls who try to act like they don't get emotionally attached after sex, because it's like, well, I'm not like that girl, so I'm not going to get needy and clingy after sex like all the other girls. So like that's how she kind of lures a guy in to getting into a relationship. For some women, it's just sort of like, oh, I don't get emotional and I don't cry like those other girls. Or if a guy goes to a girl and is complaining about like his ex-girlfriend or even his current girlfriend doing something, it's like, oh, well, I don't do those things, I'm not like that girl. That's kind of where the origin from my research has come from as far as what a pick-me girl was originally intended to be. However, I do think that we still use that term for girls who do those kind of things, but we also throw that term around for any woman who does anything that a man might find attractive or appealing. So like if a girl is like, hey, I'm cooking a meal, or like, hey, look at me, I look really great after working out at the gym, everybody's like, oh, it's a pick-me, as if anything that this woman does that may actually get male attention must only be for the validation of male attention, so that she is immediately labeled a pick-me. I think it's even snowballed even further into the idea of any woman that doesn't go along with the mainstream feminist women's liberation, you know, modern woman narrative becomes a pick-me, because she must be doing that to appease men. Really throw that word around anytime we just want to use it as an insult to women. So I think it's important to note, I've touched on this in a few social media posts, but I haven't done a full video about this whole topic, is the concept of neediness versus desire. For a naturally feminine being, which most women are, having a desire to be seen by the masculine, to be just seen and witnessed in general, and I mean fully seen, for her radiance, for her beauty, all those things are totally normal and natural. It's part of being a feminine being. We want to be seen, we want to be witnessed. It's a completely natural thing, and I don't think we should shame women for that, and women should not be shaming themselves for that, because it is totally a normal and natural desire to crave attention from a masculine man, to crave attention from the world, to crave that, to desire to be seen as a beautiful woman, as an intelligent woman, as a strong woman, as a sexual woman, to want to be seen in all those beautiful feminine archetypes. It's totally normal and natural. That desire is not something you should ever shame yourself for, because it is so natural and is so beautiful. When it gets into neediness is when you start to have a problem. I've heard some women say, well, I thought men wanted to be needed. Let's face it, in reality, most of us kind of want to be needed, right? Most of us want to be needed because it gives us a sense of security. Because if we're needed, then we're valuable. And if we're needed, then the other person may not leave us. But really, it's based in fear and insecurity. We all have it. We all have our fears and we all have our insecurities. That's not something we should shame ourselves for either, but that is a part of us that we likely want to work on if we really want to get into a healthy, stable relationship. Because relationships that are based on neediness are not necessarily the most healthy. Because if you need that person in your life, you're less likely to really show up as your full self and be seen, because you could risk rejection. you run the risk of not enforcing your boundaries or not actually living out your truth and living out your values or speaking your truth, because there's that risk that you might lose that person that you need, or at least that you perceive that you need. So you don't actually get to be your full self. And that's in relationship, and that's also with the world, because if you desire attention from men, say, if you're a woman and you desire attention from men, there's things that you might do that are perfectly healthy and natural. You might do things to enhance your beauty. You might take good care of yourself so you have a healthy glow. You might connect to your creativity and sensuality because you know that that's what men find attractive. And it doesn't even have to be a surface thing. You could, get a certain skill, or you could learn about a certain topic, or, you could fight for a certain cause and find something that you're really passionate about because you know that that passion from within you makes you a more magnetic being. You're becoming a better person, and you're becoming more of yourself, and you're having that deep desire to be seen in that greatness. That's totally normal and natural, and it's beautiful. If it's neediness and you need that attention, you need that validation from people, from men, say, you may not show up as your full self because you're going to show up as the version of you that you think that people want, which may or may not include parts of who you actually are. You're going to be less likely to set boundaries because people don't set boundaries if they feel like they need to please people, because boundaries are not always going to please people. You're going to be in people pleaser mode, so you're going to be more likely to compromise your own beliefs, your own values, your own morals because you're trying to please somebody else. You're not going to be able to stand in your own power as much if you have that neediness. Whereas if you have that desire, then you're more likely to do positive things in your life and show yourself love, enhance the beautiful gifts that you already bring to the world, because you're going to desire that people see that in you. I see desire as openness. Desire is a very open-hearted, loving thing. You feel it inside you. Sometimes it can feel like an ache. It absolutely can feel like an ache when you feel that deep desire in you, that yearning for love, that yearning to be seen, that yearning to be witnessed, the yearning to be claimed by a masculine partner. All those things, that's a yearning, and you can feel a deep ache for that. But it's an openness. Neediness is a closedness. It's contractive. It's a pain of like, I need this. I'm not going to say you're never going to find a partner if you're in that contraction. However, you're probably not going to match with a person who is really well suited for you, because in reality, that neediness is going to cause you to do things that you may not do, that may not be in alignment with you. It's going to cause you to attract people who could very easily manipulate you, could very easily abuse you. Because in reality, people want to be desired. They don't necessarily want to be needed. There are men out there who want a woman who needs them to appease their ego, but most men are going to eventually find that exhausting. They're gonna really crave a woman who desires them but doesn't need them. At least a truly healthy masculine partner is gonna want that, especially because at his core, the masculine desires freedom. And I'm not talking about somebody who just wants to be a little boy playboy. I'm talking about inner freedom. If he has a woman who needs him, is needy for him, he's gonna feel suffocated. He's gonna feel smothered. Whereas if he has a woman who desires him, that's going to be a turn on. That's going to fuel his masculine energy. It's going to fuel his passion, his polarity. That feminine desire for a partner is much more attractive than neediness. People who are needy, or people who need each other, can have long relationships. Are they going to be the healthiest relationships? Maybe, maybe not. But people who desire each other and who actually actively cultivate that desire within each other, those are going to be those long-term relationships that are super passionate, that you see people who seem to have that same love and connection with each other that they had the day they met, that they have, when they get older. They're the people who have that genuine passion for each other. The desire is normal, natural, beautiful. Neediness, a lot of us have it. A lot of us have those fears. A lot of us are kind of feel like we need to people please. Those things they're normal, they're common, but they're not necessarily healthy. And it's not about shaming you if you do feel like you're in neediness or something like that. It's more about knowing that at the root of that neediness is probably some kind of wound or something that really is available for you to work on. And it's actually in your benefit, and for your partner, for your future partners, for your children, for the world, for you to work on those things. So the way I view it is that a real pick-me girl is really somebody, as a woman, who's operating from neediness. And that neediness is probably going to be expressed in different ways. However, labeling any woman who has a desire to be seen by the masculine, to be witnessed, to find a masculine partner as a pick-me, and as that being a derogatory thing, is really kind of ridiculous. Because at the end of the day, if you're a straight woman, you desire the masculine to witness you, to love you, and to accept you fully for who you fully are. And it's normal, embrace it. I will admit that when I first read the definition of a pick-me girl, like the original definition of the, like, I'm not like other girls, saw a little bit of my former self in that, which I always encourage you, if you see something, you know, a way that you used to be and you're in the healing process and you're working on it, but you see something that really makes you realize how much you've messed things up in your past, or something that you don't like about who you used to be, like, honor it, own it. I don't love everything that past me did, and I don't love all the choices that past me made. However, I honor her for making the decisions that she thought were the best decisions at that time. You know, I was very invisible, I would say, throughout most of my adolescence. Then I ended up in a male-dominated field. I worked in stand-up comedy, so I was around a lot of men, and I was around a lot of men who had a lot of feminine wounding, a lot of men who have a lot of hatred and distrust of women. Probably the root of that could probably go back to their mothers, and definitely past girlfriends and things like that. And so I was kind of trying to be the cool girl. Now, I wasn't trying to date a lot of these guys, but there was a sense of listening to so many guys complain about women all the time, where I would start to feel like, oh my God, I don't want to be like that. So I spent a lot of time trying to reject anything about me that was like a typical girl, because I didn't want to be seen as just a typical girl. I will admit, I spent a lot more time around men, and I did not develop a lot of female friends, which is actually the main reason I actually started my blog and YouTube channel, Everyday Starlet, was because I realized that I had really no female friends, and I wanted to connect with other women that I felt like were interested in the same things as me and that aligned with me, and I wanted to create more of a community in that sense, because I'd spent so much time around guys, and a lot of guys who really disliked women, and I really wanted to try to get out of that world a little bit. I will admit to definitely being somebody, and I didn't go around bragging about this. This is not something that I would go around and be like, oh my God, I just don't connect with other girls. Like, I wouldn't go around saying that to people, because that's just not my style. But I will admit that there have been a lot of times in my life where I found female friendships challenging. Not because I didn't like women, but because I personally felt like so many women that I'd find and I would meet and I would surround myself with were very much in their masculine. So it would become this, everything would be a competition. Like, everything would be, you know, competing for men, competing for jobs, competing for everything, and I found that exhausting. So to a certain extent, I shut off friendships with women because I just couldn't handle that kind of constant competition. If you are a woman who has a hard time connecting with other women, simply because so many women are very much in their wounded masculine today, I don't want you to think that, like, oh my God, I'm automatically a pick-me. The world right now, and the masculine feminine dynamics of people, and people are operating from so much wounding and everything, it's hard to connect with people that you really align with. And I don't want you to think because you're having trouble finding people to connect with or people that you align with, that automatically means there's something wrong with you. All you can do is work on healing yourself, and the right people will start to come into your life. That's really the important thing. But I did fall a lot into the category of feeling like I needed to be different, of wanting to be like, prove to guys, especially if it was a guy I was interested in, that I was not like other girls. Now, here's where that becomes a problem. This was a lesson I had to learn the hard way, and I've talked about this on my social media, and I've gotten a lot of pushback from men, but I swear it's true. I don't want it to be true, but I swear it's true. The type of woman that a man shames or complains about is the exact type of woman that he actually wants to be with. I've had so much heartbreak trying to learn that lesson. So much heartbreak. As much as I don't want to believe that it's true, it is. And it's funny how when I say that, I've had a lot of guys assume that I'm saying that it's because a guy is shaming me, and I'm like, oh, it's just because he totally wants to date me. It's like, no, that's not why I'm saying that. It's because I have known so many guys over the years that would complain about women that, I don't know, did something or were a certain way, or, you know, looked a certain way or did a certain thing or something. Then I would be like, oh my God, I'm different, so I must be what he wants. It wasn't from a fake place. There are women out there for sure who would try to be somebody different. For me, it was just like, oh, well, I'm not like that, so he must be into me. Nope. No, every single time. Wish it was different. I actually just had this proven to me again in a situation with a guy who was complaining about a certain type of woman, and I remember thinking like, oh, I'm not like that woman he's complaining about, so he must totally be into me. And sure enough, if he didn't start seeing a woman who was exactly like the woman that he was complaining about. It's because with the masculine, where his attention goes is what he's attracted to. So even if he's giving, and I'm not at all, I know there's a lot of girls who get upset, like, oh, that's like saying that if a guy is pulling your pigtails and that means he's into you and it incites violence or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that's a positive thing at all. And I'm not saying, look, if a guy were to complain about blondes with big boobs, I'm not gonna be like, oh my God, that must mean he's into me because he's complaining about me or he's paying attention to me. Like, I'd be like, no, like, grow up. Like, that's not mature. Like, I'm not saying this is a positive thing that men do. Because I think as a man, if you're sitting around shaming or judging women, then you probably have too much time on your hands. So I'm not at all saying this is a positive aspect of men today. I'm just saying that that's what's true. And I've fallen for it so many times where I would think because a guy was complaining about a woman who did, you know, XYZ or was like something or whatever, if I wasn't like that, I'd be like, oh, well, that must mean he likes me. No, he always ends up wanting the girl that's like what he's complaining about. Ladies, that's for men to work out. Like, that's their stuff to work out. It's not our stuff to work out. It's their stuff to work out. I highly encourage men, if you're doing that, you know, work with a men's group or a men's coach or something to work through that stuff. I'm not saying that that's something that women have to deal with. I'm just saying I think it's something that women need to be on alert for. If you find a guy who's shaming a type of woman, like even on social media, there'll be guys who will literally bash women who post like booty photos all the time. And every single time when like one of those guys will post a picture with like a girlfriend, like, hey, this is my new girl or something like that, I would go to her page out of curiosity and her entire page would be just booty photos. I'd be like, oh, yeah, didn't like girls who did that, huh? There you go. I don't really feel like over the years I changed my personality so much to be the type of girl that the guy said that he wanted or to avoid the things. But I do think that overall, I tried to reject a lot of things. Like I tried to reject my emotions. Like if a guy complained that a woman had a temper, I would suppress my own anger, which I have a video about the dark feminine talking about some of this stuff. Like I suppressed a lot of my, like all my dark feminine to be the good girl because I thought that that's what men wanted, because men would always complain about women who would cry all the time or get emotional or get angry or something like that, or get really clingy, and I'd be like, oh, I'm not gonna be like that. I'm gonna be the cool girl. And I definitely feel like I fell into that, trying to be the cool girl or be the good girl, like that kind of mentality. For me, that's been my biggest aspect of trying to heal my feminine energy, was to not reject those parts of myself and to accept that that's part of who I am. It's part of what makes me a feminine being. And any man that can't handle that or doesn't want that in his life just doesn't want me in his life, and healing that aspect of myself. But I know I definitely identified with that. So I think that's one type of pick-me girl. I do think that there's another type of girl that gets labeled as a pick-me, that is a woman who just embraces more traditionally feminine roles. Like she'll post what she's baking or cooking or sewing, or, you know, she'll post that she does laundry, or she'll post that she does things that are more stereotypical or traditionally feminine, or even stuff that is a little bit more sexual, you know, like a post-gym photo or a bikini photo or something like that. And they get labeled as a pick-me because it's always assumed that these women are doing this for male validation. And, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I mean, I've posted photos like that before. There's a part of me at times that's been like, hey, maybe a guy would see that I'm doing this and think I might be a good wife. Why not? However, I personally would never do any of those things just to get a guy. I would do those things if those things felt good for me and alignment for me. And I only think that it's really a negative thing if a woman is doing that stuff to lure in a guy, but she, like if she hates cooking, but she's constantly posting pictures that she's cooking something because she's hoping to get a guy to pay attention to her, to think that she'll be a good wife so that then she can trap him and never cook for him again. Like that's manipulative. It's toxic. And as women, we wouldn't want a guy to do that for us. So I wouldn't encourage a woman to do that for a guy. Or if you're, I don't know, you never work out at the gym, but you're constantly posting pictures of yourself in like gym gear to make it look like you work out, to be like, hey, look at my post-workout glow, but you've never worked out. Like if you're being phony and it's not genuine, then I think it's a problem. I mean, I think it's a little psychotic, right? However, I think if you are just doing these things because you enjoy doing these things and you want to share them, and you feel like a genuine desire to share that you look good today, or share that you like what you cooked, or share that you liked that you did some kind of Pinterest craft or something like that, and you just want to share it with the world, and if it turns men on or makes men interested in you, then great. But if it doesn't, and you're not needy for that attention, but you just have a genuine desire to share this, and if a guy likes it, great. If a guy doesn't like it, that's fine too, right? Then I think it's healthy, and I don't really think that women like that should be labeled. I mean, unless you're being phony, which at the end of the day, especially on social media, you don't really know if someone's being phony or not, right? You don't know if they genuinely want to do it or not, and if you're just following somebody's posts on social media, it probably doesn't really matter. I don't really like the idea of labeling women who do those things as being pick-me's, because at the end of the day, you know, as long as it's being genuine, you're being authentic, even if you do have a desire for men to pay attention to you, that's great. If you're doing it out of this like neediness, like, oh my god, I have to post this and I have to do this because I have to get a guy to like this, because I need a guy to pay attention to me, I mean, it's going to come across in what you're doing. You're not going to feel as in flow, and it's going to feel very, very contracted, and it's going to wear down on you. That's when it starts to feel exhausting. Whereas if you're just doing it because you just genuinely did something, or you look a certain way and you feel like you want to share it, then it comes across much more natural. And you know, if you have a desire for men to enjoy what they see, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when you start faking it, or there's that neediness around it of like, oh, if a man doesn't like this or doesn't pay attention to it, then like my whole world is falling apart. Like that's when it starts to get into a problem. I'm not a fan of shaming anybody, really. So I'm not a fan of shaming that behavior if you do have a neediness around it. However, if you do feel like you have a neediness around doing stuff like that, that's where you kind of want to look at like, okay, where am I seeking this external validation from? Why am I seeking this outside of myself? What can I do that's more loving for myself? And start working on healing that part, working on those, you know, your fears, your wounds, your insecurities, things like that. Like that's where I would just encourage you to start working on that. Don't shame yourself, but just start working on those areas. So there's another type of pick-me girl that I really don't like, and I gotta be honest. I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I don't like this because I don't like the energy behind it. And that is the pick-me girl that feels a need to, one, always side with men. They have this really kind of delusional idea that men are like infallible and can do no wrong, and that everything is a woman's fault. And as a result, also shame women and judge women and actually belittle women, particularly women that they don't really know or know much about, as if everything is a woman's fault and nothing is ever a man's fault. I have a problem with it because I think that's dangerous, for one. I mean, it's a dangerous mentality to have because nobody's perfect. Like, nobody is perfect. Nobody out there is going to be perfect. And I do understand the concept of a lot of people who believe that men have gotten a pretty bad rap in a lot of different areas, and wanting to show some love and care and encouragement for men, and wanting to uplift and support men, and I'm not discouraging that. I am saying that when you start to get into a mentality of men can do no wrong and men are infallible, that opens up a whole can of worms. That opens up a whole lot of stuff, because at the end of the day, it's really no better than the idea that all men are bad. It's not. Because what it is it's taking a large group of people and it's projecting on all of them one idea. Either they're all bad or they're all perfect and can do no wrong. And that's dangerous, particularly for women, because let's face it, the reality is men and women are different. We're equally important, but we're not the same. Men are, in general, physically stronger. Women are always more vulnerable, particularly in sexual situations. Women run the risks of pregnancy. Women are not, in general, as physically strong. If you look at the actual statistics of violence, and I know a lot of people are going to argue, well, men don't report violence. I'm not going to get into that whole argument. But at the end of the day, women are more vulnerable in these situations. As women, because of that, we're given an inner wisdom. We're given an intuition. We're given an ability to read people. And if we disconnect from that ability to read people, which by identifying one group of people as all being one way, whether it be all good or all bad, we're disconnecting from our own intuition that determines each individual person's intentions, each individual person's energy. That's dangerous, because as a woman, if you walk around and say all men are bad and you just assume your whole life that all men are horrible, you're going to shut yourself down from any connection to a man, which is not healthy. I mean, because most women are going to want a connection with a man, so that's not healthy. But if you walk around thinking that all men are inherently good and can do no wrong and are never going to harm you, you're potentially going to put yourself in a position where you could very well be harmed. So neither one of those ideas is actually healthy. And when I see the current idea with some of these, I don't like the term pick me girls, but that kind of mentality of these women who believe that men can do no wrong, you're literally disconnecting from that feminine wisdom that is so important for keeping women safe. When I see women who are basically like, oh, poor men, and I have a video too about women who coddle men, my concerns with that aspect of things. And, you know, men don't do well when they're coddled. They don't. And that's a problem we have today. So when you have women who kind of have that pick-me energy where they're coddling men like, oh, poor men, poor baby, oh, poor you, feminists have been so mean to you. Maybe they have. Maybe some of these men do need love and support for sure. However, that's not how men grow, and that's not how they become better. They become better by women connecting with their dark feminine energy, of challenging them, of inspiring them. I have videos about that as well. So I find the kind of pick-me girl in that category to be destructive. Like, I understand that there's a sense that she feels like she wants to support men and uplift men, but there's a way to do that. For one thing, as women, we really can't guide men into their masculinity. We need masculine leaders to do that. Being in support of masculine leaders who are going to guide men in the right direction, yes, absolutely. As women, we should totally do that. Doesn't mean as women that we're not able to call out men who are not in alignment. That's a big part of being the feminine. The feminine does call out the masculine when they're out of alignment. That's our dark feminine energy. That's our, you know, if a man is operating from ego, we want to like literally slash his ego off. That's our Kali energy. That's an important part of the feminine to connect to. And I find that this last category I'm talking about of pick me girl, really, they're very quick to call out women's egos, but they seem to not be as comfortable calling out men's egos, and I think that that's a problem. It's going to be a problem in our society, because men being coddled and mothered too much is not going to bring out the best in men. It's not going to actually inspire them to step up. I also noticed too a pattern too, oh my god, I saw this video, it broke my heart. There was a woman who was sharing a story on social media about a problem she had with her ex-husband in her marriage. And obviously it was one aspect of an issue that she had with her ex-husband. And it seemed like a small thing. A lot of people were kind of like, oh, you break up your marriage over that? And she ended up doing a follow-up video saying like, no, I didn't break up my marriage over that. That was just one of the things that I had an issue with. And there was a woman who stitched it in a bikini, like commented on it saying that, oh, well, I bet his second wife will treat him much better or something. It was like very, like tearing this wife down for sharing her experience with her ex-husband. And I realized that this particular woman, I don't even know her name. I don't follow her or anything. She's always in a bikini and she's always trashing women and saying that like, well, she'll be the second wife that'll treat a man better. Like, it's like the biggest, the biggest toxic pick-me energy. If you want to, I don't like the term pick-me, but like that's toxic pick-me energy right there. Like, oh, I'm gonna put on a bikini and then just bash other women and say like, I would treat your husband better than you would. So I'm gonna be honest with you, most second wives, this is not always across the board, because sometimes people get married, they're not in alignment, they marry somebody else they are more in alignment with. It does happen for sure. However, that really only happens if people have healed their wounds from their first relationship. I do know from the experience of being an ex-wife, you never really know what somebody went through in a relationship. And to say that you would be different for that man in a relationship, you don't know, because how that woman is now is what she became from being in that relationship. Now, not every person is going to have that same experience. However, if you weren't in that marriage and you don't know that experience, you don't know what the other person potentially did to make this person this way. And I'm not putting it all on the man in this situation. I mean, you could put that situation in reverse. A man who leaves a relationship, he is probably the product of what that relationship was. So if either person is angry and bitter, you don't know how much of that was them and how much of that was the other person. And I'm sure that in most cases there's some of both. I'm going to tell you from my own experience, there's been plenty of times that I have gotten into a relationship with a guy who's complained about an ex. He'll complain about the ex, and I will then be like, oh, I'm going to be everything that ex wasn't. Again, that's the early pick-me energy that I was talking about. So like very frequently I would date guys who had dated like kind of the angry girl, and then I would be like the sweet, nice girl that he would date after. I would suppress all of my anger because I'd be like, oh, he doesn't like the angry girl. He doesn't want the angry girl. 9 times out of 10, I would become the angry girl. I remember quite a few times when that would happen, and I would be like, I don't know where this is coming from. Like, I'm not normally an angry person. And I'd start to realize that, well, for one, most of the time some of these women were the angry girl because this guy was making them the angry girl. And I don't know if it was always that they were consciously doing that, or if they were just being them and that's what brought out anger in people, you know what I mean? But I would start to find myself morphing into exactly what a guy would complain about his ex, not intentionally, but because either that's really what he wanted and that's what he was trying to draw out in a woman. Very frequently, and I talked about this in my narcissism video, very often if a guy is used to playing the victim in relationships, if you don't actually abuse him, like say with your anger or something like that, and he wants to play the victim, he'll get addicted to that victimhood, so he'll bring that on you. I'm not saying that that's every situation, but I'm just using that as one example. I think as women in general, I'm just talking about women in this situation, but people in general, when you start bashing other people for sharing their relationships, you don't know the whole story. You weren't in that relationship. So to say as a woman, like when women say, well, I would treat him better or I would be a better wife, you might not be. Because you would be amazed once you get into certain relationships with a certain person of a certain personality. You'd be amazed at what that person might make you tap into within yourself. It might not be parts of you. I've broken up with guys simply because they brought out a part of me that I didn't like being. I was like, I don't want to be this girl, and this man brings this part out in me, and I don't want to be that girl. So I would end the relationship because I'd be like, I don't want to be the girl who's angry all the time. And I've talked about this in other videos that I'm learning to tap into my anger, but in a positive way. And you know, I do think that what we tap into in certain relationships is probably what we need to tap into, and relationships are a mirror and all those things are valid. However, in this particular situation, if you're a woman who is actively trying to shame women for simply speaking about their situation or their experience or their past, and you're trying to be like, well, I would be different with that man, don't. It's the shaming part that I have a problem with. And like, to me, that's where the pick-me energy gets toxic, is when you have women who, one, ignore any faults that men possibly could have. Because at the end of the day, everybody's human, everybody has faults. And if you just pretend that men can do no wrong, you're putting yourself in danger. And that's where you can't kind of like enable toxic men and toxic behavior and things like that. And I think that's really dangerous. So I would never encourage women to actually do something that enables toxic behavior in men. And I think sometimes when you get into this last category of pick-me girl, you're actually doing that. You're enabling men to be toxic and unhealthy, and we don't need more of that in our society. We need more men to step into their healthy masculine energy, which means supporting and encouraging masculine leaders who are leading men into a healthy masculinity, not just sitting back and being like, oh, men are perfect and you know, men can do no wrong, or like, oh, poor men, poor woe is me, or actively bashing women who have gotten caught up in feminism and stuff. You don't know where they are. You don't know where their headspace is. So it's really important to not bash women when they're in that place. You can speak out and say you don't like certain behavior, or you don't support certain behavior, or you think certain behavior is good or bad. I mean, I do it all the time, but when you're actively out there bashing and shaming women, even specific women, for certain types of behavior or things like that, Our society doesn't need more women hating on each other. We need more women to actually band together and lift each other up. And that doesn't mean that we can't call out women when they do something wrong, but I think it's also important to not shame or judge women when they're really just doing the best that they can in a relationship and trying to speak out and trying to speak their truth. And when you start shutting women down in that sense and shaming them for simply, you know, trying to work on themselves or heal their wounds or try to evolve from relationships, I think that's where it starts to get into really toxic and negative behavior. In reality, desire, totally normal, natural, embrace it, love that about yourself. Neediness is probably something you want to work on, because neediness is possibly going to put you in situations where you may compromise your morals or your values, you may not enforce your boundaries, and it also leads you to, like I said before, it doesn't lead you to community and connection, because you end up feeling like other women are the enemy, and you end up bashing other women or treating other women badly or putting other women down, or you get into this competitive nature, which is very masculine. I mean, when you start getting into that competition where you start trying to compete for men, that's very masculine. The feminine is not about competition. The feminine is about open-hearted love and support, and not seeing other women as competition, seeing other women as your support system. And yeah, that being in that neediness, which I think is really what we kind of originally meant as pick-me energy, isn't really helpful. But owning the desire, the natural desire to be seen and witnessed and to be desired by the masculine is totally normal and natural, and we should embrace that. But feeling that neediness of like, I need to put other women down, or I need to ignore my own intuition or my own instincts in order to please a man, that stuff is not healthy. And I'm not here to shame people for doing it. I'm not here to shame anyone for that kind of behavior, because I don't think that shaming actually helps situations. However, if you find yourself doing that, or you feel like you identify with that to a certain extent, I would just encourage you to just heal that, to work on it, to examine that, like, okay, why do I do that? To actually sink in and try to work on those parts of yourselves, because it's better for you, and it's gonna be better for your relationships. It's gonna be better for everybody, for the world. Desire is wonderful. Desire is beautiful. It can be painful sometimes, but it is beautiful and natural and wonderful. Neediness is something that we shouldn't shame in ourselves, but we should really look at and see what parts of ourselves that we can work on and we can heal. And again, just being nicer to each other, to be honest, especially as women, being nicer to each other. And also, this is gonna be a radical thing I'm gonna say, but like, we can support men and encourage men and cheer men on and want to see men grow and be the best version of themselves, and also support women and empower women at the same time. It's not an either or thing. Like, we don't have to lift men up and drag women down, and we don't have to push women up and drag men down. It's not an either or situation. We can do both. Men and women are at our best when we are both strong. Men and women are equally vital for the continuation of our society, and bringing our natural masculine and feminine gifts to the world is incredibly important. And we're better if we uplift all of us, instead of feeling like we need to compete with each other or tear each other down, or tear down one gender or uplift another gender. We end up compromising ourselves because of neediness to please other people, or our neediness to try to tear other people down, like, and actually just connecting to our own natural desire to know that it's natural to be a feminine woman and desire a masculine partner. It's totally natural, it's normal, it's beautiful. Embrace that about yourself. But don't feel like you need to clamp onto that, and you need to compromise who you are and what your values and what your morals are in order to do that. I have a lot of videos about connecting with soul rather than ego. Really, neediness, the pick-me energy, a lot of that stuff is from ego. If you're connecting to your soul, you're not gonna go wrong. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope this video clarified a few things for you. If you do see some of yourself in some of this pick-me energy, I've been there, we've all been there in some way, shape, or form in the course of the different types of pick-me energy. So it's not about shaming yourself, it's just about honoring who you were and knowing how you're gonna be when you move forward. So if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you have any thoughts on this topic or any other topics you'd like me to discuss, leave a comment in the comment section below. I love to hear from you, and I love your suggestions. This was a suggested video, so I really love to talk about topics that you guys are interested in. If you want to learn more about connecting to your feminine energy and also how to communicate from your feminine energy, then I have online courses, details in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.